So I built a pretty interesting device yesterday. What this is a Raspberry Pi Zero inside of a Sega Genesis cartridge. And what this does is it's currently running the RetroPie operating system. I mean, obviously you can see that. And what that does is lets you play emulators and whatnot on a Raspberry Pi. So what I did is put the Raspberry Pi in this cartridge. Obviously took out all of the cartridge's components and all that. And if you look here in the bottom, we've got an HDMI output right there, a USB input here, which is going to be for your controller, your keyboard, stuff like that. And then you've got a USB power source here. So basically this, you can either get an extension and plug this into the wall if your TV doesn't have a high enough USB output power. I think this requires 1 amp, but I know a lot of TVs only put out half an amp. So get an extender, you can solve that problem, but the TV I have here works just fine. And then you basically hook this up to your HDMI on your TV. And essentially what I was going for with this was something similar to a Chromecast, I guess you say, or something kind of like a Roku, to where this device and a controller is literally all you need to play, a lot of classic games. I know it's in a Genesis cartridge, but this plays NES games, Super Nintendo games, Genesis, Game Boy. It can play Game Boy Advance. I don't have Game Boy Advance games on it at the moment. But anyway, let's open this up and I'll show you guys what's going on inside. Okay, so most Sega cartridges are going to be held together by 2 of these T10 screws. And if you take those screws out, you take the back plate off, normally what you would see here is a Sega Genesis game motherboard, I guess you'd call it. It's more of a chip, but whatever. But what I've done here is obviously taken that chip out and put in a Raspberry Pi Zero. And the reason I chose to use a Sega Genesis cartridge is because if you look here, that motherboard for the Raspberry Pi fits in there absolutely perfectly between these 2 little tabs up here and the 2 screw holders down here. So this requires no glue, no electrical tape, anything like that. This board literally just pops into place and doesn't move a bit. The only type of modification that I needed to make to this cartridge is to Dremel out a couple spots, actually 3 spots, for the power, for the USB input, and for the HDMI output. So, I mean, really, it looks pretty neat. When you put it together, you really can't even tell that it is a modified cartridge aside from the tentacles hanging out the bottom there. But yeah, I made a custom label for it. Here on the top, things got a little bit messy trying to glue down that top little tab. So I'll have to get that all cleaned up. But yeah, this is basically it. So let me plug this in and I'll show you guys exactly how it works. Alright, so here it is all set up. Like I said, it's running the RetroPie operating system. And let me show you exactly how it hooks up back here. So here, let me turn on the light here. So you've got your Raspberry Pi Zero right here. You run the USB cable, like I said, straight into the TV. Run your HDMI cable, again, right into the TV. And then what I've got going on here is for the USB input, I've just run a Amazon USB hub. Don't worry about the electrical tape on there. Had a little mishap, but basically I've got a wireless keyboard running into that USB hub, and also a original Xbox controller that's been modified to work via USB. So after it's all booted up, you can see here you've got your Game Boy, got your, turn that back, Mega Drive, Nintendo, RetroPie settings, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy Color. So let's go with Super Nintendo for the time being. Pick a random game here. How about Adventures of Batman and Robin? So you just pick the game you want and give it just a couple seconds here, and boom, boots right into the game. And it works this way for pretty much every system. I've tested every system that every game that I've put on it. I've tested the systems for that. Game Boy Color works fine. Super Nintendo's fine. Genesis is fine. I've noticed a bit of screen tearing in the Genesis emulator. I believe it's running on Pico Drive. You can change out the emulators, but that gets a little bit difficult. But yeah, for the most part, everything works fine. Everything seems to be running at full speed. Saves work. You can adjust some of the visual settings. If you want this to be full screen, you can adjust that. Again, it requires a little bit of work to do that, but it does work. So if you're in the middle of a game and say you're done with that game, basically you just press start and select, and what that does is take you right back to this screen to where you can pick either a different game or back out again and pick a different system.